Okay, so by the time this is out, it won't be breaking news, and you'll all know about Edu Gaspar, Arsenal sporting director, has officially left the club. After 5 years at Arsenal, he has left for, well, we don't know the specific reason yet. And whether that's good or bad news, we'll end up finding out over the next 12 months. Everyone has their own opinions as to why that's good or why that's bad, and to be honest, I'm sort of in the middle. I'm not sure. I don't know how specifically detailed he was involved with the good transfers, the bad transfers, the good things at the club and the bad things at the club. What I do know is Arteta's had a very strong impact on all of those things. And if I'm being totally honest, I'm not really clued up with the sporting director market to know who would come in and do a much better job than what Edu has done. So, what we're going to do is discuss the transfers he has been involved with since he's been at the club. And we're going to go through whether or not they've been hits or whether or not they've been misses. So let's begin. I'm going to start with a cluster of four because they all basically sit in the same category, all misses. None of them have really made an impact at the club when they've been here. And that's Austin Trusty, who we signed from America, Matt Turner, who we signed from America, Alex Runnison, who is probably been the worst signing since Arteta's been at the club, and Pablo Mari, who, to be fair, in my opinion, I don't actually think he was as bad as what some of the other signings have been. I think for what he was, which was a backup to Gabriel, I think he was alright. He wasn't amazing, not good enough for a title winning team, but a decent backup for a team that's trying to get into Europe in the Premier League. So to confirm, all of them misses. I'm going to jump straight into another cluster of misses. Willian, Cedric Suarez and Marquinhos, none of them worked out. I think when we looked at Marquinhos, we all had hope that he was going to be a young Brazilian from the middle of nowhere who was going to come in and do what Martinelli done and surprise us all. Absolutely not. Don't even know if he's still an Arsenal player or not. But nonetheless, absolutely terrible. Fakest Brazilian I've ever watched play football. Then there's Willian, an absolute miss. One of the worst signings of the Arteta era. We learned at the time from that not to go for on the decline footballers. Well, I said that we learned from that. And then when we went and signed Raheem Sterling on loan. So maybe we haven't. Absolutely terrible at Arsenal. And then, well, fair play to him. He agreed to leave the club without us having to pay out his contracts. But another Brazilian signed by Edu, not good, absolutely terrible. We'll forget about that one. And then Cedric, who at the time came in as a bit of a backup option at right back. I think he came in on loan and then we signed him for free. At the start, was decent, put in some good crosses in some games. But as time went on, the longer he stayed, I mean, he only left at the end of last season. And yeah, I think we all got very tired of seeing his face at the club, so an absolute miss. Okay, Nuno Tavares and Albert Sambi Lokonga both came in with, well, they're part of a window which really took Arsenal to the next step, and it was a significant window with the likes of Ben White, Odegaard, etc. But them two in that window were obvious misses by the end of it because Albert Sambi Lokonga came in with a lot of excitement, recommended by Vincent Kompany and Thierry Henry. And Arteta went for it basically because he was recommended by Kompany to sign him. And while I think sometimes he was chucked into the deep end and people forgot the age he was, I don't think it ever quite worked out for him at Arsenal. And there were some times in games where we were questioning what he actually brings to the team. And him not being at the club now basically sums up that he was an absolute miss. And then there's Nuno Tavares, probably one of the worst signings made by Arteta at the start when he first came in. Brought us excitement, brought us enthusiasm in the team. And then there was that game at Anfield when he completely lost the plot. And we saw the true bozo gene in Nuno Tavares, and we've seen it ever since. Even at the club he's at now. He'll go and have an amazing game and get a red card. Have an amazing game and score an own goal. Whatever it may be, he is the definition of a bozo. So without a doubt, both of them players miss. And so while we're on the topic of that transfer window, let's go through the cluster of other players that came in during that transfer window. Martin Odegaard on a permanent deal, an absolute hit. This is one of the few that Edu Gaspar has recommended himself and really pushed through himself, and he was the one who identified Odegaard, he said himself. And that's an absolute hit. We know now how much Arsenal are struggling without him, and he's the club captain and one of the best creative midfielders in Europe, so an absolute hit. Then there's Benjamin White, came in at the time for 50 million, and people were wondering, why are we spending this much money on another defender? Didn't make sense, but since then he's converted into a right back and he's been one of the most important, most consistent players at the club. An absolute hit. Aaron Ramsdale at the time came in when we had Bernd Leno, and people were questioning that signing, a significant portion of money for what we thought he was. And there was a lot of question marks, but he came in and he transformed the way we played out from the back. He gave us energy, gave us passion, and there's a lot of people who didn't want to see him leave when he ended up leaving. And that just goes to show just how much of a hit it was at the time for getting into the top four. Him being at Southampton right now is a complete discredit for how good he is as a goalkeeper. Ended up being in the England squad, never really pushed through to become the number one. Nonetheless, a very good shot stopper. Very decent at playing out from the back, not as good as what Raya has been, but still very good and a big upgrade on what we had in Leno. So an absolute hit. And then there was Takahiro Tomiyasu, came in I think on deadline day, and a lot of people were very surprised by that. It came out of the blue. And I think for the money it was, and for the unexpected signing that it was, part of me wants to say it's a miss because the amount of injuries is just ridiculous. But also, I can't help but think he has been a very good player when he has played. So I'm very uncertain on this, and I'd end up changing my mind through thinking through it 5 times. I'd end up changing my mind. So I'm just gonna go with hit because I think for the money it was, for the quality he is when he is fit, I'm gonna have to say hit. One of the earlier signings that we made, it was only a short-term loan, but for what it was, Matt Ryan. I think we got him from Brighton on loan. Nonetheless, when he came in, I think it was a decent appointment. So I'm going to say hit. Not really a significant talking point to have, but I think for what it was at the time, a hit. Now I'm going to go to Arteta's first significant transfer window, and that was, of course, under Edu Gaspar at the club. Gabriel Magalhaes and Thomas Partey, both of them absolute hits. Gabriel, the first of the project, really, and look at him now. He's part of the arguably the best partnership in Europe. I know recent times might offer up a lot of debate, but if we're being honest, it's probably the best defensive partnership in Europe, definitely in the Premier League. He's scored the most amount of goals as a centre-back since he's arrived at the club. And yeah, he's been an absolute hit. Thomas Partey, I suppose there's a lot more debate for him because of the amount of injuries. But like the Tomiyasu one, I think the quality he's given us and the upgrade he gave us in that area, the way he's implemented his profile as a footballer into Arteta's system as a key cog, I think suggests that he's been a hit for what it is. Now I'm going to go on to the transfer window, which really pushed us into our first title challenge with Man City. That is when we went to Man City themselves and took Zinchenko and Jesus. And we also signed Fabio Vieira in that window as well. So let's start with Gabriel Jesus, because I think at the time when he came in, he gave us something completely different. We were all blown away. The energy he gave us, the enthusiasm he gave us, I think you have to say it's a hit. Him as well as Zinchenko at the time were the reason for Arsenal pushing on and becoming a different level from what we were the season before. Remember that season we first challenged with City, we weren't in the Champions League. We fell short of top 4, and then all of a sudden we turned into this insanely good football team. He brought us champion mentality, he brought us leadership. Now the injuries have been a problem, but I think overall when you look at it, the way Arsenal have transformed since these signings, you're going to have to say it is a hit. And that goes for Zinchenko as well, transformed that left back role. Remember, Kieran Tierney, a lot of people wanted him to be the club captain. Everyone absolutely loved him. There was a time when he was arguably Arsenal's best player. Zinchenko comes in and completely takes him out of the squad, and no one even talks about Tierney anymore. Zinchenko now, of course, he's about 4th down in the pecking order, but nonetheless, at the time, for what it was, similar to Jesus, the championship mentality, the leadership, the profile into the system, it gave us so much, and I think you're going to have to say that's a hit as well. Now, Fabio Vieira, at the time, there's a lot of excitement. It came out of the blue. We're like, wow, this cultured footballer, this young footballer from Portugal. We're all watching the clips, we're seeing the crosses, the touches, but since he's come, it's just not worked out, and now he's back on loan at Porto, and it's been a complete miss. And even when you look at the money he cost, we could have signed anyone other than Vieira that summer, and it looks like a complete waste. Okay, I'm going to go into a January transfer window for this one, a little cluster of 3 players again. I know this is all over the place with the timings, but just bear with me, just go along with it. Kivior, Trossard, Jorginho in a transfer window midway through the season where we needed a bit of energy to push us on and help us win the title. We didn't end up winning the title, but they definitely gave us improvements. Jorginho, we were all upset because we were all expecting Caicedo to come in. And then Jorginho came in, and since then he's been a very good signing. Come in for a very small price, and he's given us a lot of leadership. He's given us some really good performances. Yes, there was that one moment against Tottenham where he basically dropped his points in that game. But apart from that, he's been absolutely spot on every time we've called upon him. So I think for Jorginho, I think that's an absolute hit for the price. I think it was, for a plan B behind Caicedo, it was absolutely perfect. And at the time, I was so angry. I never saw what Jorginho brought, and I was so stupid to not see. And then when he came in, I think he's been so good. Even when we see him come in now, you know, he won't play for weeks. He'll come in and just drop in a 8 or 9 out of 10 performance. So yeah, an absolute hit. And then there's Trossard. I think an absolute hit as well. I mean, the amount of goals he's given us, the amount of games he's saved us. I know recently we've had to rely on him too much, and it's not looked so good. So people's opinions of him might be a bit blurry, but overall, for what he's given us, I think it's got to be a bang-on hit, surely, for the price as well. Yeah, an absolute hit. And then there's Jakub Kivior. I'm going to have to say a miss, really. I think it had potential to be a hit for the price and for what it was, being a backup, being a squad rotational option. But we've seen in recent games that the quality's really not there, and he just looks like another one of those where we're all left with a bit of intrigue, but sort of doubtful because we didn't know who he was, and we've sort of been proven right. And yeah, I think that's a bit of a miss. Okay, now let's go on to the significant transfer window of the Edu era. I think probably the highlight window of the Edu era. Now, how many of these he actually influenced himself, I'm not quite sure, but let's go with it. Let's start with Declan Rice, £100 million, a club record transfer fee, an absolute hit. I know recently this season, again, look, everything's in context. Right now, things aren't looking good, so people are going to be a bit frustrated with the players that I'm mentioning. But overall, let's look back at what they've given us, an absolute hit. Last season, the solidity he gave us in midfield, the goals, the set pieces, the leadership, the power in midfield. Declan Rice, don't get it twisted, is a very, very good player, and I was so eager for us to sign him. I've never been so convinced of a player that Arsenal have been linked to that we needed to sign, and I think he's justified and proven why we've spent that money for him. Now look, £100 million is a lot of money, but you have to pay what it's worth, unfortunately, because behind Rodri, who else is there? And so we go on to the second one, which was the first transfer of that window, and that's Kai Havertz. Came in with a lot of doubt. And still there's a lot of doubt. £65 million for Kai Havertz when he was, stinking out the gaff at Chelsea for the past few years. Comes to Arsenal. First half of the season last year wasn't looking good at all. We didn't know what position he was. And then the second half of the season, he became a number 9, a striker, and the amount of goals, the amount of assists, and the amount of good results Arsenal got came through him. And so maybe it's a hit. I still think with Havertz it's a bit of a tricky one because the price tag, the wages he's on, and the fact that we're only in the second season with him. With Rice, we saw such a big impact he made in his first season. But with this one, there's still so many doubts around him. So I'm honestly not... Me personally, I would say a hit because I still think that if you build correctly around him, we look a very good team. It's just things aren't working so well right now when Arteta's choosing to play him in midfield and it's just not working out. But for me personally, I would say hit, but I completely understand if people are at home saying miss. And so we go on to David Raya, who came in on loan and now he's our permanent keeper. And at the time, we were very confused because we all loved Aaron Ramsdale. But since then, this season in particular, he's been very good. His shot stopping from penalties, his shot stopping in game, and most importantly, his playing out from the back, his use of his feet is absolutely incredible, and he's taken us to another level. So an absolute hit for me. And then we go on to the final transfer of that window, and that's Kieran Tierney, who was very unlucky in his first season at Arsenal because he went and faced an ACL, which took him out for the entire season. This season, we've seen the quality. Now, he's still catching up with fitness here and there, but from what we've seen, he's a very, very good player, and he's proven to be very important to the squad. Now, he's not going to play every single game because when everyone's fit, we've got a lot of options there, but I think Arteta's proven at the start of the season that he's calling upon Timber, despite him being out with an ACL injury last season. He was very quick to put him back in. So I'd say that is an absolute hit so far. And so we move on to our final transfer window, the most recent transfer window. Maybe it's too early to say, and so I'm not really going to be able to give a solid answer for any of them, but let's go with Calafiori so far. It's been a hit so far. Injuries haven't helped him, but when he's played, he's been very good, and he's helped this Arsenal team a lot. Marino, again, we haven't seen too much yet, so I really can't answer that. And then there's Raheem Sterling. So far, from what we've seen and the lack of minutes he's been given, that would suggest that it's a miss. And so that's it. That's what wraps it up. And that's what's really disappointing about the most recent window. Maybe that's a reason as to why he's no longer at the club. Because this most recent window, when we were really needing a window to bridge the gap to Man City and cross that line, the names I've mentioned, is that really good enough to go and win the Premier League? I'm not quite sure. So yeah, I'd say as of right now, Calafiori hit, Marino miss so far. I know it's still early. And Sterling miss so far. And that's about it, I think. I hope I've not missed anybody. I think that's it. The problem is there's just been big clusters of misses while he's been at the club. And I don't know who's been responsible for some of these signings. All we know is the big signings, we hear them come out and they say Arteta convinced them. So how much of this is Edu actually doing? What's he actually doing to convince these players to join? Is it him that's scouting these players, or is Arteta saying, I need this player to fit this system? So that's why it's quite hard to judge Edu's time at the club, because we don't know how much of an influence he had. What we do know is he's been involved in such an increase in positivity at the club, and you know, the points and the positions in the table don't lie. Now we know that his relationship with Arteta has been really good as well, and they both got on very well, and by the looks of it, from what we've seen on Twitter and by a few journalists, Arteta's going to have a big say in whoever comes in next, which I think is very important. And so am I sad that he's leaving? No, not really, but like I said at the start of the video, I think we're going to find out how good he was in the next 12 months. But it wasn't just the signings under Edu that we need to look at. We do need to give him credit for keeping Saka at the club, a couple contract extensions while he was here. Saliba, of course, Gabriel, you know, Ramsdale before we sold him. Look, a number of players, Odegaard, that we've managed to keep on the books. Now there are some questionable ones. Eddie Nketiah for over 100 grand a week and giving him the number 14 shirt, and he's not scored a goal for Palace since he's left and joined them. That's not so good. Now you can look at the sales as well. Emile Smith-Rowe, again Eddie Nketiah. But apart from them, really, we've allowed a lot of players to leave for peanuts, really. So his selling has really not been that good. And so that's about it. That's all we can really talk about, and that's all we can really discuss about Edu Gaspar. He's gone now, and we're going to find out how good he was, again, over the next 12 months. I really hope whoever comes in next is going to understand where Arteta is trying to take this club, and he's going to understand the club. And he's going to, hopefully, bring in some star quality into this team, because we need it. And so I'm going to leave it at that. I want to know what ones you would disagree with and why. There's no point just saying, I don't agree with that, and not giving a specific reason as to why not. Now put that in the comments, let me know. Again, I'm open to a few of them, I'm not quite sure. But remember, when judging these, try not to judge it based on the last few games this season. Judge it overall rather than just the past few games. Now I'm going to leave it at that. Make sure to like, subscribe, and I'll speak to you soon.